Good evening, and welcome to WCAT's 5th Middlesex District State Senator Candidates Debate for the upcoming November 6th election. I'm the moderator for this debate. My name is Bill Carroll. Before the debate, lots were drawn to determine the order of the candidates, and the candidates in the debate are State Senator Jason Lewis and ERIN CALVO-BACCI, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. The press panel this evening is Bob Burgess from the Wakefield Daily Item, and I will be presenting questions from the Gatehouse newspaper myself. Don't ask why. All other papers in the district were invited to be on the panel, but they declined. There are no opening statements in this evening's debate. In turn, a question will be asked. A candidate will ask a press panel question. The candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the question. Following that response, the remaining candidate will have the opportunity to present his or her 2-minute response to the question. To allow for as many questions as possible in the time available while maintaining the ability for all to have a chance to respond, candidates should please keep their answers short and to the point. Questions have not been provided to the candidates in advance. Questions must be relevant to the issues and important to the town. Questions of a personal nature aren't allowed. At the end of the debate, in turn, each candidate will present a 2-minute closing statement. The producer, David Watts Jr., requires the moderator to maintain strict compliance to the stated time limits in order to be able to have as many questions as possible from the press panel. He tells me that every debate. The town moderator will govern the conduct of the debate, and we will start now. Mr. Burgess, your question to ERIN.
Thanks, Bill. How would this district benefit from you being elected?
Thank you for the question. This district will benefit from me because I am a small business owner and the only candidate that actually has deep roots in this community. I was born in Malden. I had moved to Reading with my family. I have lived in Wakefield when we first started our family before going back to Reading. As a business owner, I sell into these communities as well. So I am very much involved in the communities, have a really deep understanding of what these communities need, especially with the issues that we're facing during these most difficult times.
Well, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I appreciate WCAT hosting the debate tonight and everyone here in the audience and joining us at home. It's been a great privilege to serve as the state senator for Wakefield and the other communities of the 5th Middlesex District since 2014. And I wake up every morning just as excited and motivated as the first day I was elected to get to work and do everything I can to support the needs of our residents and our businesses and all of our organizations in these wonderful communities. I believe that I have a strong track record of working on a bipartisan basis with all stakeholders to deliver results, which is what really matters for our communities. I've been effective in securing millions of dollars for local projects. That includes local transportation improvements, parks and recreational facilities, helping make our downtowns thriving. For example, we secured a $100,000 state grant along with State Representative Broder and Wong for the Wakefield Downtown Initiative and also for other local needs. I've also been a leader on Beacon Hill in fighting for affordable health care for everyone, including improving mental health treatment and addiction prevention, and also fighting to defend women's reproductive health rights against attacks that are coming from Washington. I've also been a leader on efforts to ensure adequate funding for our public schools. Nothing is more important to our communities than strong public schools, and I've led efforts to update and reform our school funding formula and ensure adequate resources. And lastly, I believe I've been effective in fighting on behalf of our working families here in Wakefield, across the region and the state. For example, I've led efforts to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour and to create a paid family and medical leave program, the strongest in the nation, which is going to help millions of families here in Massachusetts. Thank you.
This question is to you, Jason. What would you do if elected to help combat the opioid crisis that has affected the 5th Middlesex District and the region as a whole?
So the opioid epidemic has been ravaging our communities, and one of the hardest things that I have to do in my job is talk to a mother or a father who has lost a child due to an overdose death. We have been tackling this issue very seriously for a number of years now. We've been working in partnership at the state level, with the legislature, with Governor Baker, with our State Department of Public Health, with our local law enforcement, with our local hospitals and healthcare providers and public health groups to have a coordinated and comprehensive response to the addiction epidemic. For example, some of the things we have done is significantly expanded access to treatment. We have a lot more beds now available than we did a number of years ago. We've done a lot to reduce prescribing behavior of opioids. Rather than getting a prescription when you go into a doctor or a dentist for a month's worth of a painkiller, now those prescriptions are written for a much shorter length of period. We've also done a lot around prevention, working with our young people, for example, with our substance abuse prevention coalitions right in the community to educate and support efforts to stop our young people from becoming addicted in the first place. There's a lot more work that still needs to be done, and I look forward to continuing to work with all the stakeholders involved to do everything we can to tackle both the mental health side of the epidemic as well as the addiction, because they often go hand in hand.
Erin.
We need to go further. When laws have been passed that say they cut down on the amount of pills given a prescription, they're still too high. My daughter had her teeth taken out recently, and the prescription that they gave was more than what any one person really should have. It also goes back to education. Our schools are not fully funded, and that is an issue. And what we are seeing is our special needs students are not receiving the education, and the teachers are not there to support them. This is where a lot of these crises start, because when our students are not getting the education that they need, it really hinders on their confidence. I've had 2 friends from high school who have both lost children to the opioid crisis, and both of them had in common that their children were on special education plans that were not fully met. And the wear and tear on the confidence of those children really put them in that path to go down that very evil road that took their lives. We really need to do more with starting earlier, and we need to have more partnerships throughout the community. Our police force need better support. They do not receive the full training dollars that they need to help fight these issues. This is something that I will bring to the table, and having an understanding of bringing more of the stakeholders and getting more parents involved and really going at this issue at an early age so that we can really fight this. We don't have enough beds. That's an issue too. But how do we get there? We need more money. So we need to be able to grow our economy and get the dollars necessary to go back into our communities to help fight these issues. Thank
Bob?
you.
Your question is to Jason?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
As you talk with people across the district, what have you found to be its highest priority needs?
So there are a number of things that I hear from, is that right? Am I next? Or? Yeah, go ahead. I am, okay, all right.
Switch it up.
Just didn't want to take Erin's place if it was her question.
No.
So there are a number of things I hear. Our economy is booming right now. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates that we've had in a long time, which is obviously a good thing. But too many of our families are still struggling to make ends meet. They're struggling with the high costs of obviously of health care, of housing, of child care, college costs. And we have, we've done a lot to try to tackle these issues. I mentioned the work that we've done to raise the minimum wage, to create a paid family leave program. We have also done a lot to address housing costs by passing a very significant housing bond bill. We passed legislation known as the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act. So there's a lot of actions we have taken, but there's more that we need to do to help our working families and our communities. And what's at stake here in this state Senate election is really a very stark choice between two very different candidates. On the one hand, you have somebody who has progressive values, who wants to move our communities and our state forward, who believes in putting people first and helping lift up working families. On the other hand, we have my Republican opponent who has some very right-wing positions, has in the past taken positions that put profits over people. For example, she did not support, not only did she not support raising the minimum wage to something decent that people can actually live on, she has in the past not even supported having a minimum wage at all. So our workers should compete with those in Bangladesh, I guess, to eke out a living. She opposed earned paid sick time when that was on the ballot several years ago, which is really shocking to me, knowing that my opponent owns a business that makes confectionery, and to think that workers would come to work coughing and sneezing and sick when they're making food that's going to be sold to the public is pretty unfortunate, and I would think my opponent would know better. So there's a clear choice here between somebody who has values that are going to move our communities forward and my Republican opponent who does not. And that's really what's at stake in this in the state Senate election.
ERIN.
Thank you so much, and thank you for bringing up the stark differences. But the real big difference is I am a business owner, and when I go to work, I want to make sure that my employees are taken care of, and that is my job as the business owner, not the government's job. So when my opponent says that I voted against, what he fails to talk about is how I have seen how the minimum wage has actually hurt the very people who work for me. Because when minimum wage goes up, so do all the other costs, such as daycare, and what people have to pay for daycare. And with the paid sick leave, we offered paid sick leave to our employees. And that was something that I wanted to do. And why I did it was because it gave me an advantage to be able to attract and retain the best employees. I certainly understand business, and I certainly understand that the way that we fight hardship is by creating opportunities. And I am the stark contrast difference standing here because I had lived here in Wakefield. And my husband and I made the very difficult decision to sell our house and move our family of 5 into a 2-bedroom apartment so that way we could keep the lights on in our business and keep our employees and also make sure that our vendors were paid. We could have easily made the decision to just foreclose and walk away. And that really wasn't what goes to the core of what I believe in. The other difference is I'm hiring vulnerable people, and I am working to make sure that they get ahead. I have had teen moms work for me, and I've helped them get the services that they need that no one else was helping them to find. I have had a ward of the state working for me who was told that she did not qualify for for financial aid for college. I made sure she got that so she could go on to school and have a better opportunity. So the real difference is I'm there at the grassroots level. I'm the one that's rolling up my sleeves and working to make sure this gets done.
Thank you. This is to ERIN. Portions of the 5th Middlesex District have seen big construction boom of new development in recent years. If elected, what can you do to help bring attractive developments to the district?
So I have worked on the Zoning Advisory Committee within Reading. It was an appointed position. And we need smart zoning so that way we can increase real development that's going to support our communities. Overcrowding our communities with housing is really putting a burden on all of our services. We need smart development that includes a healthy mix of commercial. And when my opponent talks about the help that he has brought to our thriving communities, I guess he hasn't really driven around our communities and looked closely at the number of storefronts that have closed and the number of storefronts that are closing. Storefronts are being replaced by service industries because it's really challenging to operate a business in Massachusetts. And we need those businesses so that way we can grow the economic pie and get the money into our economy to help our district, especially for affordable housing. Residents that I've been speaking to that have been on affordable housing have found that it really isn't affordable. I met with a mother who has 2 children, and she is paying $1,400 a month. That's not affordable. We need our elders to be able to age in place. So I really do believe that it is a good, healthy mix of commercial development that will help offset all the expensive costs in Massachusetts.
Thank you. Well, I think this is an area where my Republican opponent and I largely agree. We do need to attract the right mix of investment. We want to have a fair amount of commercial development, retail development, and obviously housing. We want to encourage mixed-use development with some of the housing being obviously affordable for seniors and young families. And also making sure that it's smart growth development that is close to wherever possible public transportation. We already have big challenges, obviously, with congestion, on our roads and our highways. So being able to take advantage of public transportation, we're very well positioned in our district here in Wakefield, in Reading, obviously Melrose and Malden, and other parts as well to take advantage of that. So we are very attractive with all the development that is spreading out from the greater Boston area. The key is to make sure that it is smart growth development, encouraging things like 40R developments that are well planned and that make sense and fit within the scale of our communities. And that's the way we'll encourage both vibrant downtowns with more customers to shop there and dine there, and more local businesses. And we've seen that certainly happening in Melrose. We've got great opportunities here in Wakefield we're working on, fantastic opportunities in Malden with the redevelopment of the City Hall. And that's a project I'm very proud of. It's a state and local partnership that we've teamed up to create really a unique project in the entire state, which is transforming downtown Malden. And that's going to create great opportunities, economic opportunities for the whole region.
Bob, next question is to Jason.
Jason, will we ever see changes to the formula that determines how the state funds education for cities and towns?
So there's 2 key aspects of this, and this has been an issue which has been deeply important to me ever since I was first elected. In fact, one of the main reasons that motivated me to run for office originally was when my daughter, who's actually now in college, when she was in kindergarten, and there were major cuts in school funding at that time, and teachers were laid off, and librarians were laid off, and we were asked as parents to please come and volunteer in the school library just to keep the library open. And ever since then, I've been working hard to ensure that all of our schools in all of our communities have the adequate resources they need. It was my legislation, actually, that created a bipartisan Foundation Budget Review Commission several years ago. That commission worked for a year, talked to all the stakeholders, parents, teachers, superintendents, came out with some really strong recommendations to update the Chapter 70 formula. And the State Senate has now passed legislation, which I co-sponsored, to fix our school funding formula. So we've made great progress. We're very close. It would be nice to see some leadership from the governor on this issue to help us get this across the finish line. But I can tell you that I personally and the State Senate are very committed to making these changes. The second piece we need, though, in addition to changing the formula, which we're very close on, is we are going to need new revenue in order to provide adequate funding to the Wakefield schools and all of our schools. And that is another key area where I differ from my Republican opponent. I am willing to be honest and say we do need additional revenues to adequately fund our public schools. And that's why I've called for the passage of the Fair Share Amendment, or so-called millionaire's tax. And we have not seen anything from my opponent that would not just increase revenue, but would even lead to reductions in state revenue if she had her way and was able to cut corporate taxes, for example, and give tax breaks to big businesses. That's the opposite of what we need to adequately fund our schools.
ERIN?
Well, it would be nice to start with not burdening our schools with the unfunded mandates. That would be one place I would start with. The formula is not equitable across the district, and I'm happy to hear that they're working on closing that gap, but all the teachers, the educators, the superintendents that I've been speaking to come back with, it's still not enough. We don't know what the exact answer is. We don't know how much money is going to solve the problem, but we do know that burdening our schools with unfunded mandates is not the place to really help those schools. In regards to the millionaire's tax, I'm glad my opponent did bring that up because it was ruled unconstitutional. So what my opponent is looking to do is waste more time and more taxpayers' dollars by going on something that was ruled unconstitutional. We've seen it in Connecticut. So thanks to Connecticut and the way that they had been overtaxing, we got the benefit of having GE come to us. What do you think will happen if we take the same approach? We will lose the very people who are creating the jobs and adding to our budget. That is what has to stop, and that is a stark difference between my opponent and me. I am a job creator. I am someone that understands the difficulties in making sure that all the bills are paid and that the lights are kept on. And it is by creating a really strong educational foundation that we will have great jobs. We still haven't seen any solution going towards closing the skills gap. Most of our comprehensive high schools are focused on college prep, not teaching students how they can survive and have sustainable skills when they leave high school if they choose not to go to college. And that's something that we really need to focus on. Thank you.
This question is for you. A ballot question this November seeks to repeal a state law that prohibits discrimination against transgender people in public places such as restrooms and restaurants. Do you support or oppose this ballot question?
This has been an interesting one for me because as I've been going around talking to people, most people don't have enough education on it. And it is not something that I oppose. We have been going to the bathrooms with transgender people for years. So I found it interesting that this was something that was put to the ballot, that when people don't have the right information, what's really concerning, and the people that are not in favor of supporting it, it's because they truly don't understand the ballot in its entirety and what the question is really saying. For me, a mom of 3 girls, when my children heard it, to them, it made them concerned, thinking, would they be in the bathroom with a male? And that's something that was unsettling. So it's something that I would really want to have more education on. I'm not a full supporter of going to the ballots because what we found is people don't have enough time to read the information before they make a decision. And this is one of those areas that I'm afraid that this could change without having the right information put in front of people.
Jason.
So I'm not really sure what to make of the answer my opponent just gave. I can't tell which side of the issue she's on, and maybe she's obfuscating this on purpose. Well, I'm going to be very clear about which side I stand on. I stand on the side of our LGBTQ friends and neighbors. This is a basic human rights issue. This is a basic civil rights issue. Do we treat our neighbors with respect and dignity? And I will be voting yes on question 3, which will preserve the law that we have, which I proudly voted for in the state Senate. And in fact, I spoke on the floor of the Senate in support of this law, which simply provides protections for transgender people against discrimination. This is a category of people which faces some of the worst discrimination and abuse of any of our citizens. They also have among the highest rates of suicide of anybody in our society. And the least we can do is provide simple, basic protections for them. That's all that this law does. There have been absolutely no incidents of any bathroom issues in any of the cities, towns, or states where this law has been in place, and it's been in place in Massachusetts for several years. So when my opponent raises these issues of her daughters being concerned, and I have 2 daughters as well, and I love my daughters more than anything in the world, when she raises that, that is fear-mongering. That is a dog whistle to people about being afraid of transgender people and allowing them to use the appropriate bathroom. And I just think that's disgraceful. I think we need a state senator who's going to stand up and speak clearly and loudly about issues that matter, and civil rights issues and human rights issues. To me, there's nothing more important than that. And I will continue to speak up and proudly vote on the Senate floor and vote on November 6th to preserve the law that we have and make sure that our transgender friends and neighbors and our LGBTQ friends and neighbors and others who are vulnerable and dispossessed have the protection that they deserve.
Thank you.
And I absolutely
No.
support civil rights.
Hold on. Bob, your question to Jason.
To who?
Jason.
Would you ever support reducing the Massachusetts sales tax back to 5%?
That's a question to me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the answer to that is no. The reason is because if the sales tax were to be reduced to 5%, which was proposed by the Massachusetts Retailers Association, and my Republican opponent is a member of their board, so this is something that they actively have championed, and certainly they think it would be good for retail businesses. But what I can tell you is who it would not be good for is people who depend on mass health to get the health care that they desperately need. That would not be good for senior citizens who depend on the state to help provide home care services. It would not be good for students who are going to school and want to make sure that they have enough teachers and guidance counselors and social workers, because all of those things are funded by state dollars. And if we were to reduce the sales tax to 5%, that would mean $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion would be taken out of our state budget. And there's no way that that could be made up with any sort of waste, fraud, and abuse, as my Republican friends like to say. That would mean deep and severe cuts in our school funding, in our health care programs, in our mental health treatment and addiction treatment, in our environmental protections in our state, in our early ed and child care, in our funding for our state colleges and universities and community colleges, would all face deep, deep cuts. So that is not the right way to do it. What I would support is reform of our tax system overall, which would shift more of the tax burden to those who are most able to pay the taxes, which would be very wealthy individuals and wealthy large corporations. I do think we have a regressive tax system in Massachusetts today, which means that too much of the tax burden is borne by lower and middle income folks and small businesses, and we want to shift that to wealthy folks and larger businesses. So any changes to the sales tax would be part of that overall tax reform.
Thank you. Erin.
I am in favor of rolling it back. I am a member of the Retail Association of Massachusetts and serve on their board, and we are losing business to New Hampshire and to the internet. And this was a way to be able to get those dollars back here in Massachusetts. I had been fighting on the internet sales tax, which took a long time to get that passed. I am very much in favor of bringing tax dollars. I find it interesting when my opponent's talking about all the people that it hurts. Did you think about how much you hurt people when you take a pay raise? So,
Excuse me. This is not a pep rally.
so here's
Enough.
the difference. $42,000 would pay for a full-time dispatcher for our police force. It would outfit a police car for 2 years, and it would pay 2/3 of a police officer. So when my opponent likes to try to go after me as painting me as just a Republican, what he fails to understand is I am someone who is really more of a moderate. I am very much in favor of civil rights for people. And my answer in regards to the bathroom bill was because it was the most honest in that everyone that I'm speaking to really doesn't understand it. And that's something that we really need to take a long look at. It goes back to education. We really need to make sure that we have the dollars available. I, myself, as a business owner, make sure everyone else is paid for before I get paid. As your next state senator, I would do the same thing. Beacon Hill needs to make sure that all of its people are taken care of first. Thank you.
Thank you. My question up next. I'm up? Yeah. Okay, my question to Erin. Do you support or oppose the ballot question that would put a limit on the number of patients a nurse can be assigned at a time and find hospitals that violate that provision? And if you could you explain your understanding of how this law would function?
From my understanding, this is something where it's the government telling hospitals what they need to do. And this is something that I absolutely oppose. And this came about when I was talking with people as I was door knocking, and someone used it in the terms of the classroom. How would we feel if teachers were told how many students they could have in a class? Each teacher can handle a different number of students because each student has a different requirement. Patients in a hospital have different requirements. So to force these small hospitals to make sure that they are staffing at a set number means you're going to hurt a lot of community hospitals, and we're going to see more costs increase. We're talking about lowering the cost of health care. That will be a certain way that we're going to increase those costs, which again puts a burden on the people in the 5th Middlesex District, and that is why I'm opposed to it.
Thank you. So I believe that health care should be a basic human right, and nobody should have to worry about whether they're going to be able to get the care that they need or that a loved one needs from cradle to grave. And I've done a lot of work as your state senator to try to ensure that we have the highest access to health care of any state in the nation, and that we do a lot to control health care costs so that it's affordable for everyone. For example, I've been a leader on issues of public health and prevention when it comes to youth substance use, whether that's alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana. And so I come at this issue certainly with that as my core value, that we need to do everything we can to provide good health care, and we need to make sure that patients are safe. At the same time, we do have to be smart about how we achieve that. And I don't believe that this particular proposal is the right way to achieve, or the best way to achieve patient safety. So I will be voting no on question 1. But I understand there are very strong views on both sides of this issue, and I certainly understand the motivation to put forward this proposal because everybody wants to ensure that there are enough nurses to take care of you when you're in the hospital or a loved one. There's obviously nothing more important than that. That said, every hospital is different. The patients that they serve are different. The acuity of those patients is different. And also our hospitals today, use a care team. They don't just rely on nurses, they rely on social workers, they rely on community health workers, they rely on CNAs, and nurses obviously aren't all the same. They have very different training and experience levels. So to kind of have a one-size-fits-all, I think, is problematic. I'm also concerned about the impact on our community hospitals. Obviously, Melrose Wakefield is hugely important in providing health care and providing good jobs and community support. So I'm worried about the impact it could have in raising costs for our community hospitals. So for all those reasons, even though I understand the motivation, I will be voting no.
Okay, we're past the halfway mark. We're going to flip-flop on the questions now. Bob, your question is to Erin.
Erin, if I could just stick on this topic for 1 second, what can the state do to address the ever-rising cost of health care?
The state really needs to take a long, hard look at the system we have in place, and we need to be able to have more cooperatives. As a small business owner, our family's health insurance cost is about $1,200 a month, and that's not even the absolute best care that we could get. When we had Blue Cross Blue Shield, that cost rose to about $1,800 a month. That is not affordable. And for the insurance that we have right now, it doesn't even cover everything that we need. Our youngest daughter has structural feet problems. It's really frustrating to go to the best hospital, Children's, and know that not everything is fully covered because of the health insurance that we have. We really need to take a long, hard look at to why doctors are not accepting certain insurance programs, and a lot of it comes down to they're not getting paid adequately enough from the state. So something has to change. It's not a really quick answer, unfortunately. It's not going to be a fast solution, but it's a time that we need to bring all stakeholders together. The legislators, they may have access to better health care than some of our lower income people do. We have a state healthcare system that we've done a great job with making sure that we have socialized healthcare, but it's at a really high cost, and the people that are most vulnerable are not necessarily getting what they need.
Jason.
So again, I would say here, as I did to the previous question, I start with the premise that healthcare, like education, should be a basic human right, and we should work together as a society and as a commonwealth to make sure that everybody has access to the care that they need. There's three pieces to that. There's the access to care, there's the quality of the care, and then there's the cost. I think we've done pretty well in Massachusetts, and we've worked very hard on the first two. We do have the highest rate of health insurance of any state in the nation, and I think that's something we should be proud of, and we've achieved that really on a bipartisan basis for over the past 10, 15 years. We also have some of the best quality healthcare of anywhere in the country, although we still have more work to do to address disparities in the quality of that care for some of our populations, like those with disabilities, for example. Cost is an area that I've been very focused on in my role chairing the Public Health Committee. And a lot of what we've been doing is trying to move our healthcare system from what I would call a sick care system, which is basically taking care of people once they already have chronic illnesses, like type 2 diabetes and heart disease, and move it instead to what I would call a well care system, which is where we focus more on prevention and primary care and population health, so that we can help people to live healthier lives and bring down these rates of chronic illnesses that are very expensive to treat. And we've made some really good progress. We actually lead the nation in many of these areas. I helped to create what's known as a Prevention and Wellness Trust Fund a number of years ago, which is unique in the country, and it's actually been funding community-based prevention programs to address issues like high blood pressure, tobacco rates, falls in the elderly population, and we've seen some real benefits from that. Another area that we have to really improve is mental health treatment, because that's a very expensive part of our healthcare system. If we can do better at mental health treatment and addiction treatment, that will also have a tremendous impact on reducing cost. And the last thing is shifting costs from pay for service to based on outcomes, and we're doing that as well.
Okay, Jason, next question is to you. Illegal immigration is a hot topic that has generated a lot of debate across the country. What would you like to see? Would you like to see new immigration measures in Massachusetts, and if so, what kind?
Mm-hmm. So I'm, as some of you may tell, I have a slight accent, and that's because I'm an immigrant to this great country. I was born in South Africa, and I grew up there in the 1970s when South Africa was under, as you may know, the racist and oppressive apartheid system. And that experience actually is what has inspired me to go into public service and to fight for justice and equality and opportunity for all people. So immigrants, to me, are what has made America such a great country. The fact that we have people coming with unique talents and skills and cultures to live in this country has, over the centuries, been what has built and made this country great. And we critically need immigrants in Massachusetts because our native population is really not growing. And if we're going to have the workforce to grow our economy in the years to come, we're actually going to need more. So I am very disturbed by the policies being pursued by the Trump-Pence administration and Republicans in Washington. Obviously, I believe in having a strong legal immigration system and protecting our borders. But at the same time, we need to recognize the importance of immigrants and the important role that they play in contributing to our communities. So I have supported the provisions of the Safe Communities Act, which is also supported by our police chiefs as well, notwithstanding the fear-mongering that we have heard from many on the right wing on this issue. But they do support it, and that's because, simply put, it makes our communities safer for everybody when every person feels that they are treated with respect.
Thank you. Erin.
As the daughter-in-law to Italian immigrants, I absolutely support legal immigrants. It is a policy that really needs a lot of work. I have had employees that have worked for me that have had green cards, and when they tell me their costs of trying to be a legal citizen, it is staggering. Something has to change. We have to find a way to help people get legal citizenship at an affordable price, because people are making money off of these people who are coming here wanting a better life, and they're being held up for all sorts of legal costs, all sorts of issues that they don't even truly understand themselves. And this is something that I do want to see reform, because I absolutely agree, we do need immigrants. I'm here because of my great-grandparents immigrating to this country from Ireland and Italy. My husband's family, as I had said, had come over from Italy. We need immigrants because we also need to grow our workforce. So I absolutely agree. Most of the population of my workforce are immigrants. We need to help them get to legal status at an affordable rate, and that's where the reform needs to start. And this needs to start at a national level, and we need to support it at a state level as well. So I am a Republican, but that doesn't mean I agree absolutely 100% with what all Republicans do. I'm an independent person. I'm an independent female. I truly believe in making sure that everyone has a right. If they want to come to this country and work, it's because they want a better life, and we need to support that through legal immigration.
Thank you. Bob, your question to Erin.
Erin, should we take it a step farther and become a sanctuary state?
Absolutely not. I do not support being a sanctuary state. I believe in supporting our police force. When I'm talking to our police force and they're telling us the issues and the concerns they have, that they may not be able to truly do their job, it's something that makes it too cloudy for us to follow the laws. And we really need to absolutely follow our laws. We need to make sure that the laws in place are respected and we are following them.
Actually, contrary to what my Republican opponent just said, our police chiefs actually endorsed the Safe Communities Act. And the reason is because it actually makes our community safer for everyone. And what that simply says is that you should not be racially profiled because you are a person of color. If you are taken into custody and you are an undocumented immigrant, you need to at least be told what your rights are. Doesn't mean you're entitled to a public defender, you're not, but you need to be told what your rights are. And that our law enforcement, our municipal police officers, our sheriff's departments should not be deputized to be an arm of the federal immigration enforcement. And they've got more important things to do to keep us safe and support our communities, not be members of deputized by ICE. And that's simply what the Safe Communities Act says, and what I believe we should do in Massachusetts. And what I want to be clear about, because again, this is due to fear-mongering from right-wing Republicans, that does not mean that undocumented immigrants get a free pass. They absolutely do not. If you're, doesn't matter who you are, whether you're a legal immigrant, an undocumented immigrant, a resident, a citizen, if you commit a serious crime, you will absolutely can be arrested. You can absolutely, obviously, go to trial and be imprisoned, and be deported if you are undocumented. It does not change that at all. What it has to do with is just making sure that our law enforcement are not agents of the federal immigration and customs enforcement, that we don't have, that we have fair and due process, that we don't have a so-called Muslim registry, which our president has talked about many times. That's simply what we're talking about. We should have an honest discussion about that. Again, we shouldn't be using fear-mongering to scare people, and that's what I do support.
Thank you. Jason, this question is to you. Should lawmakers play a role in encouraging the growth of green business in the state? And if so, how practically would you do this?
Sorry, Bill, was the question about whether we should grow green businesses?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And how would you implement it?
Absolutely.
Not platitudes. Let's both of you.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about some practical stuff.
We face an existential threat, which is climate change. And although we have a president and sadly Republicans in Washington who deny climate change, while every single credible scientist has been telling us for years that our climate is warming, our seas are rising, we're having more severe storms like Hurricane Florence that just ravaged the Carolinas, wildfires, and all these other challenges. The fact is, for those who have their eyes open and actually face reality, we are dealing with a major, major threat, and it's a threat to our communities. If you look at the impact of rising sea levels on Boston and the Boston region, we will see many major parts of Boston and the coastline underwater in the decades to come in major storms. So we absolutely have to take action. As a state, we've passed, and I've helped to champion these, several different laws to help move us from dirty fossil fuels to clean and renewable energy. And in fact, just right now, we are embarking on the development of offshore wind off the coast of Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has actually been described as the Saudi Arabia of wind because we have so much potential. So that is due to, thanks to legislation we passed, which the Baker administration is now implementing, which is going to lead to huge amounts of offshore wind development in the years to come. We've also done a lot to encourage energy efficiency, solar energy, as well as other sources of clean energy like hydro. And that not only is going to lead to a cleaner environment and better public health, but importantly, it's also creating lots of new jobs in the green economy. And that's exactly what we need. So make that shift from dirty fossil fuels to clean energy. Good for our environment, good for our economy.
Thank you. Erin.
I do support this, and I'm proud to say I have a daughter who is actually studying environmental tech at one of our technical schools, Essex Agricultural. And this is where I truly see the benefit of collaboration with our students. These are students who are at the forefront, and there's a lot that we can learn from them. They have a green building, and these are things that we need to be able to incorporate in our communities. But a lot of it is because people just don't understand it completely. When we make moves to ban plastic bags, it's very well intended, but it comes at a cost that people just don't understand. Why are we doing it? I believe we really need to go further with educating our public on what all of these issues really mean for all of us and what the cost is to all of us. These are areas where we can do a better job at making sure that we do have a better future for not only my children, but hopefully grandchildren to come. And these are areas that do create jobs. And we can find ways to make these opportunities be more affordable. Right now, solar is really not as affordable as it needs to be. So it's not without challenges, but again, I truly believe by collaborating with our students and learning from them. They're presenting some of the best and the brightest ideas, and there's a lot that we as a community and businesses can learn from.
Bob?
This is to Erin.
Yeah, do it.
Erin, what didn't the legislature do in the last session that you wish it had?
Excuse me?
What didn't
What didn't?
the legislature do in the last session that you wish it had?
I wish it truly had, in the grand bargain, had repealed absolutely the time and a half on Sunday pay. And that was something that I as my opponent was part of the retail task force, I was serving on the legislative committee with the Retail Association of Massachusetts, and there was a lot that was going back and forth saying maybe we'll get it, maybe we won't. And for a lot of the businesses here who have to pay time and a half on Sundays to their employees, it's at a high cost to us. When we're going out and we're shopping, that's a really big expense. And I'm really concerned that not only did they attempted to repeal it, we'll say, because they're rolling it back, but now there's talk that they're going to repeal something that we had really worked so hard at.
You get the same one.
Okay, so I'm very proud of a lot of things that the legislature and Governor Baker accomplished this past legislative session. For example, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next 5 years will lift the incomes of close to 1 million people, creating the strongest paid family and medical leave program, which will so a parent will not have to choose between taking care of a newborn baby and keeping their job. Reforming non-compete agreements so our workers have lots of opportunities and don't get tied down. That was something I've championed for years. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act to ensure that pregnant women get treated fairly in the workplace and get reasonable accommodations. We increased the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is the most effective anti-poverty program. Addressed opioid addiction with very significant legislation. Addressed youth tobacco and vaping, which is an epidemic, sadly, right now in our middle and high schools. We passed legislation to address another public health epidemic, which is Alzheimer's and dementia. Again, and I chair the Public Health Committee and was very pleased we were able to get this bill into law, which is going to help so many families struggling with Alzheimer's. Criminal justice reform, clean energy, automatic voter registration, which is going to expand access to voting, which all of us, whether we're Democrat or Republican, should support. We passed new legislation on gun violence prevention. We lead the nation in common sense gun laws. We strengthen those. We passed new legislation to support our veterans, to make sure that they have the best supports and services of any state in the nation. So we did a lot of good things. There is, however, one area that I was disappointed, and I spoke about this earlier, which was the legislation to reform our school funding formula. I've worked, for 10 years on that now, and we were this close to getting that onto Governor Baker's desk, and I think confident he would have signed it. But that bill, unfortunately, didn't make it into the end zone, and that'll be my top priority if I'm fortunate enough to return next session.
Okay, that's going to wrap up the questions for now. Remind me, who won the toss? Do you want to go first or second?
Yeah, go last.
Okay, 2 minutes each now, okay? Keep an eye out, all right?
Okay. It is time for change on Beacon Hill, and I will bring that change. As a small business owner, a mother, an activist in the community, I understand the issues that we are all facing because I truly live them. When we talk about raising up our people with minimum wage increases, we need to do it with understanding that it's also putting a cost on the very people that need the different services such as childcare, as I had mentioned earlier. We also need to understand the unintended consequences. When we talk about making sure that we have Paid Family Leave Act, what no one has really looked at is, down the road, are people going to stop hiring women or overlooking women because women typically are the primary caregivers, not only for their children, but oftentimes for their parents as well. What I truly understand is bringing more people to the table. We need to have the stakeholders there as well, and that's what people are telling me when I'm meeting them, that there are bills being passed that no one truly understood them, such as marijuana. The police officers say, hey, that's what the people wanted, but how do they truly check when they pull someone over if they are in fact driving under the influence? These are areas that we really need to bring more people together, and I will be that change in making sure that we do have more people at the table, making more of the communities accountable by working together, looking at our communities, as my opponent had mentioned, in Malden, who is doing something that is really out of the box thinking, where they're bringing public and private sector together to benefit their city. Those are ideas that we can bring to the other communities. We need to look at what works and how do we all get on that same bandwagon. So please, I respectfully ask for your vote for State Senate on November 6th. Thank you.
Jason?
Thank you. I'm running for re-election so I can continue fighting for fairness, for equality, for justice, and for opportunity for all. Every single person. It's been a great honor and privilege to serve as your state senator since 2014, and I believe I have a proven track record of getting results. And that takes working with everyone, with Democrats, with Republicans, all stakeholders inside and outside government. We've done a lot to support our local communities with investments in roads and in parks and in vibrant downtowns. I've led efforts to make sure that we have a quality, affordable health care for all and better access to mental health and addiction treatment and to defend women's reproductive rights. I've also been a leader on Beacon Hill in fighting for our public schools to ensure that every kid gets access to great education. And I've also worked hard to support and lift up our working families through better wages, better benefits, closing the gender pay gap, and providing good job training and workforce development opportunities. You know, I know my opponent quite well. I know she has good intentions and has a lovely family. But we have a very clear choice here in this election with two candidates who have very different values. My Republican opponent likes to say, you know, that she's a common sense moderate, but that doesn't square with the positions that she has taken in the past and that she takes now. Things like not supporting a minimum wage, things like being opposed to giving workers earned sick time, policies like not supporting paid family leave, supporting Republican efforts to gut regulations that protect worker health and safety and our environment. These are critical issues that are facing our communities. And that's the choice. It's a stark choice that is before the voters in this election. So I hope the voters will choose to keep moving our communities and our Commonwealth forward. And I ask for your vote and your confidence for State Senate on November 6th. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank both of you for very thoughtful and informative responses tonight. I'm really impressed. I've moderated a lot of debates in this town over the years, and I think both of you provide us with some deep understanding of your positions, okay? So I'd like to thank you both, and of course I'd like to thank you both for any time anybody runs for office, it's always admirable, so I'd like to thank you both for taking the time and effort to do that. I'd like to thank Bob Burgess for his questions and participating in the panel tonight on behalf of the item, the lifeblood of communication in this town. And again, I'd like to thank WCAT. It's a class act. They've got to run a fabulous program. The idea that David Watts Jr., the time and effort he puts in to get this whole debate off the ground and the way it's done is fantastic. And to everybody here and to everybody out in the viewing audience, remember November 6th, you get out and vote. It is not your right, it is your responsibility to vote as an American citizen. So that wraps it up for tonight. And some of the folks must have been from out of town. They didn't understand the pep rally rules here, so I apologize for being curt, but we don't do that at town meeting, we don't do that at debates. So anyway, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight, and I'd like to thank you again for participating. Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.